Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to session number 2 of our luxury real estate series. My name is Ricardo Rodriguez. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We are very, very excited to have you here. I know that many of you were here last month when we did session 1. We got some great feedback, and we are very excited to be bringing some incredible people today to speak with us about the luxury market segment and their experiences and best practices. But before I start, I want to really thank our colleagues at Realogy, Moraima and Jason for their support, as well as our friends at NAHREP, in particular Omar and Corinne, for always being so incredible and helping put together this event. And so with that, I want to again introduce you to a great friend. When I spoke with him about joining us today, he was really excited. Lucio is not only is a wonderful friend, an amazing guy, an incredible realtor, incredible professional. He is in the Greater Palm Springs, California market. He happens to be a fellow ambassador for Coldwell Global Luxury, and he is a trainer with, I would say, is the best national luxury training institute in the United States. And so we are very happy to have him today being our guest speaker. As we know, today's focus is going to be on kind of defining the luxury client. On the previous session, we talked about the general luxury market segment and what it was, and we have some great information on that. This time, we're going to be talking about the definition of what a luxury client is, looks like, and how to work with that specific client. And so with that, Lucio, welcome. So happy that you are here. So excited that we get to hear you today.
Ricardo, anytime that you ask me to do something with you, I'm all in. I think that one of the best things that we can do as colleagues is colleagues working with colleagues to help other colleagues. And that's Absolutely. Why I'm really excited about being here with you and everybody today.
No, thank you. So, you want to take it off here?
Absolutely.
You want to? That's it.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. As Ricardo said, my name is Lucio Bernal, and I am in the beautiful Palm Springs, California. Only going to be 109 today, so I wore a vest for you guys. I've been in real estate for basically almost 23 years, and working in the luxury space for a lot of that time. But it took me a while to really understand what it meant to understand luxury clients. I've got to say, if you have not watched session 1, as Ricardo mentioned, I strongly suggest you go back and watch it. I watched it myself. I took some notes. Some of my biggest takeaways were that, for example, Jade Mills, who is at the top of the sphere in the luxury space, I found it really interesting that she said that her first transaction was $17,000. Can you imagine? Now, what that says to all of us that are either working in the space or looking to break into the space, it means that anything is possible. Anyone can break into the luxury space if you just put your head into it and learn as much about it prior to getting into it. So I welcome all of you for being here, taking this 20 minutes to enjoy the ride with me. So a couple of things that I did hear from session 1 that I took notes on was the question was asked, what is luxury? And it was defined by these words: quality, a feeling, and location. And then the next question was, what is a luxury agent? Well, knowledge, expertise, and integrity were some of the things that were used to describe what a luxury agent is. So that is a perfect way to set up today's session on understanding the luxury client. So we have agents on this call from all areas of real estate, whether they're just breaking in, looking to break in, or have been working in this space for many years. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is just lean into the session. Lean into it and listen to what I have to say, because it really is just a smidget of what understanding the luxury client is. So I'm going to take this 20 minutes and have a conversation together with you. I'm not going to be able to cover every aspect of the luxury client, but I will set it up for you and cover a few of the important components. That way, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to use an analogy of a tree. So try to help you those visual people out there. I'm going to use an analogy of a tree, and then I'm also going to use an example of a current client of mine that's both a luxury seller and a luxury buyer. So let's talk about this luxury client that I'm going to reference to today. We're just going to call her the judge. So the judge, she's not the stereotypical judge that we all think of like Judge Judy. She's very different than that. And so it was difficult for me initially to sort of gauge what our experience together was going to be. And then her husband, very quiet. And by the way, she's a type A personality. And the husband is a very quiet, retired executive film producer. So let's set that aside for now. Now let's think about the tree that I was referencing. So have you ever looked at an orchard, a group of trees, and you thought they all look the same? But when you get right down to it, they're all very different. And so that's the goal for today, is to identify some differences of your luxury clients in the luxury space. So basically what we're going to do today in this 20 minutes is we're going to kind of deconstruct the luxury client. And the way that we're going to do that is what I call mind mapping. That's why I'm using the analogy of a tree. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Find a piece of paper and a pen, and you're going to go along with me with this mind mapping of our luxury client tree. So let's get started. I want you to grab that piece of paper and the pen. In this session, we're going to focus on three main components, and those components are categories of wealth, personality types, and lifestyle. So now there's a lot more to the luxury client than that, but that's what we're going to focus on today. So let's do some mind mapping. Take your pen. I want you to draw the beginnings of a tree. This is what I came up with, by the way. It's just basically you're going to draw a stump and then three large branches, and that's how we're going to get started. Here's what I want you to do. Take one of those branches and label it categories of wealth. So from that, in a tree, there's even little branches off the main tree. So this is where it begins to expand. That category of wealth is going to mean a lot of things. And I'll tell you what some of those categories are. We have and you've heard these terms before. There's millionaires, billionaires, ultra high net worth individuals, very high net worth individuals, and high net worth individuals. You hear terms like centibillionaire, demi-billionaire. Basically, what I'm saying is that tree branch of wealth expands incredibly large. You need to understand that as you're working with luxury clients. Who are you working with? How do they respond, both in business and in buying or selling homes? Something really important that I want all of you to understand about a luxury client, whether it's a buyer or a seller. There's this journey that they go through. And the more that you understand this going into the luxury space, the better off you're going to be. Here's some notes that I want you to take. The first type, when someone comes into wealth, the first 5 years are incredibly interesting to them and to us as they're going through that. So basically that 1 to 5 year period, they're just bringing their old peer groups, their old friends that sometimes don't have money, but now they do. And so they don't really know how to really function with wealth. And it's important for you to know that, because once you begin to understand characteristics, then you're going to know whether someone's within that 1 to 5 year period, and you'll know how to deal with them better, whether they're buying or selling. The next group is when someone has wealth from 5 to 15 years. Now, this segment of individuals, they're already learning how to deal with wealth. They're getting used to luxury brands. And so when I begin to work with someone like that, and I can tell right away by their certain behaviors that they have, is that I'm able to guide them a little better. Now, the third segment is that 15 plus year mark. When someone's been wealthy for 15 plus years, they're super comfortable. They're very easy to work with. They know what they want and they're looking for. That's my favorite to work with. And the reason is because it becomes a lot more fun and effortless. So Pay attention to those three very important segments of what the luxury client is. Now let's shift a little bit and talk about another branch. So now you've got one branch filled. Take another branch that you just drew, and I want you to name that the personality types branch. So we're going to shift to personalities now. So in this particular branch, thinking about the, when I mentioned before that not every tree is the same, well, not every luxury client is the same either. And the more that you understand personality types, the better off you will be to be able to deal with your new luxury client, especially if you're just breaking into this. Those of us that have been in the business a long time, it comes very natural. Those of you that are looking to break into it, I'd strongly suggest for you, if you haven't taken a DISC profile assessment, they're free online. Just Google it, DISC profile assessment. Get to know yourself. What are you, a high D or a high I or a high S? Your clients, and the reason why is because the more that you understand yourself and your personality profile, the easier it's going to be for you to understand your luxury client, how they function. What are the important things to them as they're either looking to buy or sell, and how are you going to interact with them? So it's important for you to understand the DISC profile when you're working with clients. Here's a good example. That judge client that I mentioned. So her personality, she's an A-type personality, but yet she's very sensitive and caring. And what I discovered about her is that had I not really understood that about A-type personalities, or whether she's a high D, she's a judge, so I had an idea, but I wasn't sure. So it's important for you to be able to understand those, and this is why, because within this branch, the personality branch that you just created, we're going to talk about three specific things. Write these down: expectations, communication, flexibility. All of these things are going to be really important for you to have a good assessment of as you're working with different luxury clients. So when after you assess your client's personality type, you can easily identify what their expectations are. What is it that they're looking for? Sometimes it's important for us as real estate professionals to help them understand what are expectations and guide them. For example, with my judge client, I didn't know what the expectations were, but I had to sort of pull that out to understand what it is, why it is that she's selling, and why it is that she's going to buy, and how we're going to go about that. So that's what we're talking about, expectations. On that same branch of personality, we're going to talk about communication. Different people function differently. And in the luxury space, communication is absolutely vital. Sometimes clients are not great communicators. We have to be in the luxury space. And it's up to us to determine what type of communication is best for a client, because sometimes clients don't always tell you. Here's a good example. My judge client, I love texting, but I won't text with a client if that's not appropriate for them. Well, I kind of misjudged my client because I didn't think she'd want to text. And the opportunity came available, and she says, I love texting. And she's been texting me a lot on very short things. And so that's very helpful for me, but it's also helpful for her. And so the way that you communicate with your clients is super important. So that's just one little nugget about communication with your luxury clients. On that same branch of personality, there's another little branch called flexibility. This is a very interesting dynamic in the luxury space because not every client is flexible. The thing that you need to understand about the luxury client, whether a buyer or seller, more times than not, they are a business person. And so they're very successful. They're very organized for the most part. So their flexibility is sometimes very minimal. But if you're working in a high environment, fast environment location in the country, and quick responses and extreme flexibility is really important, you've got to be able to express that to your luxury client, that flexibility is important. How do you work around whether they don't have flexibility or not? So That's why flexibility is another very important component of working in the luxury space. All right, so we've covered 2 branches. Let's get to the final branch, which is the lifestyle branch. So now you're going to label that 3rd branch as lifestyle. So here are some branches within the lifestyle branch that I want you to take note of. Motivation, why buy, why sell, money no object, frugal, anything is possible. Why did I choose these specific words to put on those branches? Because these are some of the more important points that you need to understand about luxury clients. Let's take the first one, motivation. So, for example, on my seller, the judge, what's her motivation? Why would she want to sell a home that's in a wonderful neighborhood? When I sat down with her, here's what I discovered about her motivation. It wasn't that she didn't love the home. She loves the home, but they understood that they were at a pass. They either needed to fully renovate the home, or they needed to sell and buy one that's already renovated, where they are in their careers and age. And so I understood that. I understood where the motivation was coming from. But then she threw something else in, and she said, we really want to try the country club lifestyle. I'm in Palm Springs, California, so we have lots of country clubs. But she said she wanted to stay near Palm Springs. So the next closest country clubs that were available were in the next city over. So I knew that there was motivation there to sell, but the motivation to buy was that country club lifestyle feel. And so we took them to the country club. They love the country club, but here's what I discovered about her in terms of the lifestyle they wanted to live. She still is very attached. Her and her husband are still very attached to being close to Palm Springs and the restaurants that they frequent. So when we took her out the second time to see another country club, as she got in the car, here's what she said. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to drive us around, but we've decided that the country clubs are too far from where we want to be. Great, let's still go and look at, because the reason why we kept going and wanted to look at that country club that we had set up was because sometimes you just never know. You just never know whether a client fully embraces or understands where they want to be and where they want to end up. So we still wanted to take that opportunity to have her in the car and have conversations about the other things that I mentioned, which are important to talk about. And one of them is value. Value to the luxury space doesn't always mean the amount, whether it's 2 million, 1 million, or 10 million. Many times the value is in what it gives them. What sort of value does that property give to them? And many times we think of individuals who are wealthy, that they'll spend whatever. Well, turns out the luxury client, for the most part, can be very frugal. That's another branch that you want to write in there. The luxury client can be very frugal. And so they won't always spend everything, but if it brings them the value, they will. So you need to understand that about the luxury client as well. And there are other parts that we would talk about, and that would be, for example, be prepared for anything. In the luxury space, any luxury agent in the country will tell you that you've got to be prepared for anything. And I have a lot of stories where I had to be prepared for a lot of things. Good example, my judge client. They wanted to paint the exterior of their home before they sold. And so I immediately text them painters that they can call. And she immediately texts back and said, I've already called the first one. So you've got to be prepared, just like when I got in the car and they said that they thought it was too far. I had to be prepared for that. I wasn't just going to turn my car around. I stood there in the car, we drove, we continued to talk. So again, you've got to be prepared for anything in the luxury space. So we've talked quite a bit about certain parts of the luxury clients. I will tell you that the more that you fill in this tree on your own, create more branches. Get in there and come up with other things that you think define the luxury client. I covered some of the basic ones, but there's so many more to cover to learn the luxury client, so that when you get into the business or try and break into the business, or maybe even break out of a rut that you're in the business, at some point as a new agent, you just got to jump on that tree and start climbing the branches. But before you do that, as a new agent looking to break into the space, you've got to pay attention to what's on that tree. What are all the possibilities? And another thing that I want to say to those of you that have been doing this for many years or for quite a while, take a step back. It's really important. Get off that tree. Take a step back, look at the tree, understand what makes up the luxury client. The more that you understand what makes up the luxury client, the better you will be at success, and the better that you'll be able to help others break into that business. So again, pay attention to what it means to be a luxury client, whether a buyer or the seller. A lot of components. We covered quite a bit. I went through a lot fairly quickly. 20 minutes goes by really fast, and I can talk forever, but what I'd like to do is say congratulations for looking into the luxury space. I'm sure that you'll do wonderfully there. And at this point, I would just want to pass it back to Ricardo.
Lucio, if we had more time, you could take it as long as you want. As long as you. Thank you very much.
You don't want to give me too much time.
We know better. So we have to keep Lucio at 20 minutes. Otherwise, we have to keep 2 hours. But thank you very much. This was really unbelievable. I think, what I love the most about what you said is this understanding that luxury and luxury client is not monolithic. We tend to think that it is like just one block of people, one way of operating, one type of property. And the truth is that, like you said, there are as many branches that we could imagine. And I think that the most important thing, and I love what you said, it's good to understand how you operate so you can operate accordingly with those clients. Because like, as you said, these clients have experience on the market segment. They know what they want. They're willing to pay, high price for something, but they don't want to be, overpaying for things. And so it's important to understand all of those factors in order to better serve people from where they are. And that makes them clients for life. And I think you're absolutely right on that. And I think that, to me, that was the biggest takeaway of what you said. And thank you. This was a lot of content, and you were wonderful as usual. That's why you are the luxury trainer. It's wonderful.
It is my pleasure.
And so now, guys, I want to introduce you to two amazing friends. Listen, I have to tell you, I'm very lucky to have people like Lucio in my life that are not only wonderful friends, but also amazing colleagues, obviously. And the two people that I'm about to introduce are part of this network of really, really top-notch agents around the country and around the world. The two people that I'm about to introduce you as part of the panel. By the way, Lucio agreed just yesterday to stay, in the panel, so you guys could hear a little bit longer from what he has to say, which I know you're also very excited. But these two people are I know them through the International Luxury Alliance, and they are not only amazing agents, but they are really what you would define as an expert in the luxury real estate space. And so I want to introduce you first to Georgina Jacobson. She is the loveliest person in the entire world, but she's out of Newport Beach, California, but she is the top agent on her market. As I mentioned to you, I know her through through International Luxury Alliance. She has an average price of around $4 million, which is incredible. I wish I had that, Georgina. And welcome to the panel today.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. I feel really blessed to be a part of your panel, and I also appreciate your friendship.
Oh, no, you're wonderful. Thank you for sharing with us. And then I need to introduce you as well to Frank Isoldi. Frank, again, another love, is incredible, generous, wonderful person, an amazing professional. He's in Westfield, New Jersey. He's not only the top agent in the Westfield, New Jersey market, but he's also the top agent for Coldwell Banker in New Jersey, as well as Rockland County, New York. And so we're talking to somebody who has a lot of experience and expertise on the luxury real estate market. I think you've been in the business since you were 18 or something like that, right, Frank? Just a few years
A long time. too long.
Welcome today. Thank you for doing this.
So much.
And then, as I mentioned, Lucia is staying with us. And so let me start by asking you kind of like a personal question. I started the same way on session one. I think sometimes, and I know this just from conversations and personal experience, that people assume that if you're in the luxury market segment, somehow you were born within it, that you started your business within it. I know that was not the case for me, right? I am, by all stretch of the imagination, I am as far away from that market from my own personal experience, right? But I decided to work in this space and to learn this space and to be the best that I can be in this space. And so let me start by asking you, tell us a little bit about your story. Have you always worked in the luxury market segment? And why don't we start with you, Georgina?
So no, actually when I graduated college, I wanted to find a job and I lived in LA and my parents were supporting me, and 9 months went by and they said, okay, you either have to, figure this out or you have to move home. So I wasn't able to get a job. It was 1992, horrible job market. So I moved home with my parents and actually responded to an ad in the newspaper, and it was to be a part-time receptionist in a real estate office. So I made coffee, I had copies, and then I got into marketing, and then slowly I just stayed there, and the president actually asked if I would be his personal assistant, and then that transitioned into sales. And so I kind of did it the long way, but I feel like I learned everything about the business from the ground up. So it was a very nice way to get into the business.
Yeah, now your average price is $4 million. That's quite neat. What about you, Frank?
Yeah, so I certainly did not grow up in the luxury market or a luxury lifestyle. My father was a fireman in our local town of Westfield. He did real estate on the side. So I literally grew up around the business my entire life, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Went and got my license at 18, went to Drew University in nearby Madison, New Jersey, so I could come home and work on the weekends so I could get a book of business going for when I graduated. We opened up our own boutique office. And then about 20 years ago, Coldwell Banker made us an offer, purchased us, and it was the greatest move we ever made.
Well, we are happy to have you around as a colleague. And Lucy, what about your experience? I know you mentioned some of that earlier.
Oh my gosh, look, I grew up on a ranch in Southern Arizona. I worked on a ranch for the majority of my young life, and moved to see. I grew up on a cattle ranch. Real estate was never a thing to me. I didn't understand anything about it. I moved to Seattle, and my sister and her husband opened a real estate company. I was doing the business end of it. I hated every minute of it. Moved to LA, and real estate again was never part of my longings of things to do. Somehow I ended up as a realtor in Beverly Hills. And it was to the thanks of my manager, who said, you should try the luxury space. Listen, at that time in 1998, I drove a little red Toyota Tercel. I had one olive green suit that I bought at Men's Warehouse. I never thought of myself as working in the luxury space, but I found out fairly quickly that we could do that. So that's how I ended up.
Look at you now in your fancy office. Do you remember what your break was into luxury? Like, I don't know. Do you remember that one transaction that you've had and you were like, oh my gosh, this is the one that changed my business, Lucia?
Yeah. A friend. I never, this friend of mine had many friends in real estate, and he was going to sell his house, and it was a $3 million house. And I felt super blessed. It was not something I ever anticipated happening. It happened. I gave it my best. I learned a lot, and I never turned back from there.
Yeah, mine was also a friend. I found out through a grapevine that he was going to be selling his own. It was like 16 years ago. It was 5 million, which is a big number now, and it was even bigger then. And I was brand new. I was just like 2 years in the business, and I went for it, and he resonated with that, and he gave me that opportunity, and that opened subsequent doors. So yeah, same thing. It was really a friend. Georgina, do you remember that one transaction or that one moment, and you're like, oh gosh, I just broke. Now in retrospect, right? This is how I broke into the luxury market.
Right, I do. So because I worked in the office and I knew the agents that worked there and I would always help them, one of my agent friends had gotten out of the business, but she had to sell a family home in her estate and it was for 5 million. And I almost like dropped the phone when she said, would I mind giving her a presentation? And so I said, absolutely. So we did have a long rapport and a lot of trust. And I also had another agent friend in the office help me with the transaction to make sure that we did a good job. But I felt very grateful.
Yeah, and for you, Frank, do you remember that moment?
I do actually, and I, looking back now, I realize how much I learned. This was a very prominent local doctor that reached out to me. I was so young. He was looking in the $1 to $2 million range back in 1990, which for Westfield was a huge number. I probably carted this family around to over 100 houses for 5 years. Any other agent probably would have just let them go, but I was so young and hungry. Sold them a house, and I learned so much in that process. You talk about patience, communication, consistency, not giving up, and looking back, I realized I want to be the listing agent on all these listings now because this is hard work. But yeah, I mean that was it. And then he referred me to his friends, and and that's pretty much how sometimes how it just happens.
Yeah. I also remember in that first transaction, it was amazing to me to kind of like understand the depth of kind of like the work that you need to do in the luxury market segment. Every market segment, of course, is difficult, right? They all have their challenges, but I think the thing with the luxury, at least in my experience, is that depth, right? There is this, we pretty much are doing the same things for our clients, but in the luxury market segment, it kind of like, it just expands into a whole series of things that I never imagined I had to do. And I think that for me, that kind of created that sense of confidence on what I needed to do. Do you feel that sense of confidence is important when you're working with a luxury client? Frank, since we were just chatting, what do you think?
100%. I mean, these are people that have access to tons of information. They have a lot of people most likely working underneath them if they're a CEO or, depending upon what business they're in. They're looking at us as their trusted advisor, and if we're not confident, they're never really confident in making this huge purchase or selling this huge asset with us. So I think confidence is crucial.
Yeah. What about you, Georgina? Is this something that you also kind of like connect with? This sense of confidence is an important element of working in the luxury segment?
Absolutely. And I feel that the way that I generate my own confidence from within is to have knowledge. And so if I study the market, I know something that they don't know, that also builds trust. And I find that that's a great connector. And I think that as agents, we know more than we think we do, but also to study, the different markets and even different markets in other cities, or know who to call if your client, most of our clients do have multiple residences. And so I like to tap into other markets, and that really resonates with them because then they don't feel like you're just specifically in touch with your market.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucia, would you want to add something to this conversation on confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that these are successful people, and if you're not confident, they're going to know right away. They need confidence. They work on confidence, and they need you to be that confident. It could really be the reason why they stop working with you. If you're just not confident in what you're doing, and like Georgina says, knowing information, you got to relay that without having to relay it, so to speak. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I actually bring up the visual tree thing. And for those of us that have been working in it, get off the tree for a bit and look and study the what makes up a luxury client to develop that confidence, because it could be the reason why they don't want to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. We have to be ready to work with these clients, and we have to develop the skill base to work with those clients. It's certainly it takes a lot of professional development, but it also brings you to a level of knowledge and to a level of expertise. Georgina, you mentioned expertise. I always have this conversation with like colleagues and with the agents in my team, but the difference between knowledge and expertise. I think knowledge, of course, is really important, but expertise is something that only you can push yourself to acquire and to develop. Do you feel that notion of expertise versus knowledge is fundamental on the luxury market segment? Lucio.
Absolutely, yes. And what I try to do is I really try to find things that the client doesn't know about, whether that's an off-market transaction or the highest sale. It's really to tap into things because we have access to so much information. It's to give them something that they don't already have. And that also helps prove yourself as a trusted advisor and also an expert, or even nuances in a particular neighborhood, or something they might not know about, that you're going to find an immediate connection with them because they will go to you with all of their real estate questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Lucio, what about for you, this notion of knowledge versus expertise? What is your take on this?
Yeah, here's what I would say to everybody. We can all be knowledgeable of data. Just to take data as the example, we can all be knowledgeable of the data in our neighborhoods, right? The expertise comes in how you convey that data to your client, and how you convey it is most important. Because here's a good example: if I'm working with a high-level executive, and I'm also working with someone who's a scientist, they may think or receive data differently. I need to know how to explain that to those two different people. That's where expertise comes in.
Yeah. It's not just knowing the data points. It's actually, knowing how to utilize that and become an expert on that topic. Yeah, absolutely. What about for you, Frank? Any take on?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everybody's saying. And I do, though. I think Georgina definitely hit on something which I find in my market is really crucial: having that off-market knowledge. Everybody can go on Zillow. You can find out pretty much whatever you want online right now. And again, these high net, worth individuals that we're dealing with, they have access to a lot of data. They're not necessarily looking for just data. They definitely want us to bring something to the table that they can't find on their own.
Yeah, it's really, I remember when I started 16 years ago, it was really the beginning of kind of like websites popping up. I don't think we had Zillow when I was, at the time. It was literally maybe just company websites, and people were starting to get comfortable with like online searches. And so even very early on, I felt that my job at that point was kind of like information management. Like I kind of like owned the information, and if they needed something, they needed to come to me and I would give them this. That is completely different from where we are right now, where people come to us and they know more than we do sometimes, because they're focusing on something that is so narrow that, of course, they become experts themselves, but it's expertise on data, not necessarily expertise on that specific market segment. And I think, to everybody's point, we just need to continue to develop that sense and that ability to really become experts on this market segment in order to break through it or continue to grow. Because I know that right now we have people in the audience that are new, figuring out how to do this, but also are people that are already working in this market segment. And sometimes we all feel a little bit of, stuck on our own things. And so it's important to understand that developing that expertise is really what creates a difference between you and maybe the rest of your competitors. But Frank, let me ask you, we're talking about ourselves, but about our own experiences, but let's help me define, who do you think is a luxury client? I know Lucio gave us an extraordinary, understanding of what he sees as that luxury client. Who is the luxury client for you?
So, this is really interesting, and it's changed dramatically over the last 2 years. I think COVID had a big effect on our market in general. I look at it more as like a lifestyle. What are these people buying? What do they want? We used to actually deduct for a pool in Westfield. Nobody wanted a pool. We have tons of country clubs. Everybody belonged to a club. They traveled. I'm down at the Jersey Shore right now. Half of our town, bails out after school's out and comes to the beach. Now everybody wants a pool. It's the first question they ask. Does it have a pool? Is the lot big enough? Can we get a pool? So immediately we pivot, and every listing I have, we do a survey, we figure out if a pool can be installed, how big, so it's lifestyle, it's just all about lifestyle. You get into numbers, whether luxury is 10 million, 50 million, 30 million, that's really, in my market, really irrelevant. We don't deal with those massive numbers, but, the luxury client is the client, that, is used to being treated and taken care of a certain way. And as agents, we have to pivot and make sure we're giving them the service that they're expecting.
Yeah. What about for you, Georgina? Who is this luxury client?
So in our area, we have a lot of different types of luxury clients. It's everything from people that have inherited it. We have large business owners or people that have sold their companies. We have some professional athletes. So then it's kind of figuring out what they're into. But it's kind of interesting because even in our community, we'll find that somebody has a really large home on the hill and they also want a beach house that's 5 minutes away. So it's kind of interesting, but most of them do have multiple residences, whether in the same area or out of state.
Yeah. And Lucio, anything you want to add to this? I know you just gave us most of it 20 minutes, but anything else that you want to add to this question?
Yeah, I think the important thing right now in the luxury space is we all just need to recognize that in probably every market, a lot of luxury buyers and sellers were pushed into being luxury buyers and sellers because where the market is, that weren't or aren't or never will be. And I think it's all about mindset and where they're coming from. Like, something that was the national threshold for luxury is 500,000. Now, Georgina and Frank, to you, I don't even think you can find anything for 500,000, right? And so I think that it's important for us to really understand what it means when you're a luxury buyer and seller, and are they really luxury in your environments, right? So it's, to us, luxury really probably should be more like $1.5 million and up, but it's 800,000 right now, which is, that's really not normally the luxury individual. So,
but you make a very good point, Lucio, and I think it has to do with what we are fed in terms of media and expectations, right? We think of the luxury market segment as this agent walking through this $200 million homes and like all this, like that truly is the minority of the luxury market segment. I think to your point, Lucio, there is a threshold for luxury in each market that is different. But we tend to think that if you're not selling a $100 million home, you're not in that market. I've always argued, and people ask, how do you break into it? I'm like, you break through the luxury market segment by becoming a luxury agent, regardless of what the price point is. It's always, in my opinion, is about the experience. It doesn't matter if you are a client that is at $100,000 or if you're a client that is at $20 million. The level of service and the things that I'm providing for you are going to be consistent regardless of that price point. And that's what makes you a luxury agent and not necessarily a price point. And I think Frank touched into this. Your clients grow with you. The clients that 16 years ago, I sold them a 1-bedroom for $400,000. Right now, they're buying their 3-bedroom, $3 million because they're growing and their finances are changing and life is changing and their parents now are selling their homes and all these things are happening. And so it's not about a line that we cross, in my opinion, to start working with the luxury client. It's about how you build your business to be ready for it and
right,
to demonstrate that you actually are, that you are a luxury agent. I don't know if this makes sense to you guys, and if somebody wants to add anything to it.
I actually, if I could just say, what you just said is really important. Here's a good example. Georgina, if her average price point is 5 million, and that $5 million client she refers to me to buy out here, he's probably going to buy $1 million property. He's still a luxury client. It doesn't mean that he's not a luxury client because he's only buying $1 million, right? So I think that's important. What you just said is that we have to understand and have a true sense of what luxury is.
Absolutely. And we tend to think of the luxury client as is the celebrities, the sports person, is all these things. That's not really the threshold. Listen, I work with with sports people and celebrities. And I could tell you that I have other clients that are none of that, that are working at much higher price points. And so that's not, the threshold sometimes is not the price, is not what the person does. It's just the service that you're providing. So they continue to come to you, or they come to you in the first place. And so I don't know if Frank and Georgina want to add anything to this line of the conversation.
Well, I think it's also generational too. Some people that they've bought their condo, their first condo in the area, and then they get married, and then they have a child, and then their parents are referred to you. So I think it's also looking at it, as the whole family, because there is a lot of business out there, and it's growing with your clients as they develop and their life changes. So
yeah, absolutely. Frank, would you want to add something to this?
Yeah, and I think you touched on it also. It's the experience. Luxury is not a number. It's how you as the agent present yourself. And that gets back to that confidence level, and then the experience that you give your client. I think it all ties in.
We all have this colleague, this friend out of Hawaii, Tracy Allen, and I love Tracy because Tracy says luxury is head to toe. And if you want to be a luxury agent, you have to be luxury head to toe. And it doesn't mean expensive Chanel suits. It just means you behave in a manner in which that business comes to you because you have the expertise, and because you have you're ready to work in that market segment. And I think that that's an important differential. And so, but let's talk about skills. There are a lot of questions that always come around skill-based. What skills do I need to develop? What knowledge is important for me to develop that are valuable to a luxury client? What do you think are those kind of like baseline skills and knowledge base that we need to have in order to break or to continue to grow into the luxury market segment? So I don't know. I'm going to leave it to one of you guys to jump in. So I don't know who wants to start right now.
I'll start.
Let's do it.
I think at Coldwell Banker, we're all Coldwell Banker affiliates. I think we're so lucky because we have that amazing wealth report that they put out every year. Read that from, as a new agent, read that from, start to finish and just start getting, some general knowledge about what the luxury market looks like. And then for me, it's just a lot about following trends. If you see what people are trending to buy luxury items, you'll start to get a sense of what's going to be important to them. Luxury, buyers and sellers want to work with somebody that they feel has very similar interests. And, so I joined a country club. I don't play golf. I've never been on the golf course, but I'm sitting at that patio so that they are walking in and around me and see me there. And they just assume, oh, he's a fellow golfer. It's all good, but it's almost the perception. You have to play the part.
Yeah, the closer you get to golf is what, an Arnold Palmer?
Yeah, exactly. That's about right.
That would be me, by the way.
But I think what's great about that too is getting involved in your community and what you're passionate about and what you think your clients are interested in. So I did also join a country club, and so I got involved. I do love golf, and I got involved with the ladies golf group, and it's been some really rewarding friendships, and then it's turned into some business, and it's been amazing. I also am with a fundraiser for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and so you already have a common interest with some people, and then it's just building from there. So I find that to kind of go about seeking out clients as far as mutual interests is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucia, what about you?
I completely agree with Frank and Georgina, and what I would add is the same skills that you're using to sell a $200,000 condo, you're going to use those skills to sell a $2 million property. It just may be very different levels of interaction and the responsibility, but ultimately, your basic skills, you better make sure that all those skills are super honed in.
Yeah.
And I think that if I could add one more thing, I think that negotiating to try to do something different, looking out for the client, whether it's a buyer or seller. Like, for instance, I always try to talk about the moving process and do they need a few extra days after the close of escrow to be in the home before they move? Because even though they're very sophisticated people, they don't always think about the little details. So if you can provide some value in helping them, that will really resonate with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to flip the coin on this question. So instead of talking about skills and what do you think are kind of like the top main challenges that a luxury agent faces in a regular basis, or somebody breaking into the luxury market segment is going to face? So, Georgina, what do you think those are? Those challenges?
We have a very competitive market. I think most are because of the lack of inventory. But I think that it's to try to create a differentiator for yourself, whatever that might be, so that you're known as the agent that always does X, Y, or Z. So I think that it's really competitive. So it's honing your skills to compete in that environment. And I always tell people, it's, if you connect with a client, they're going to work with you. So don't get upset if you don't get every deal, because you won't. But it's, the people that you connect with, you're connecting with for a reason. You have something in common.
Yes, it's those relationships, right? That, yeah, like you said, is definitely that connection. What about you, Lucio?
I think right now the biggest challenge is that we're all competing for the same listing sometimes, and the only way to, and again, Georgina's right, you're not going to get everything. You're going to lose out, and it's how you deal with that makes a difference. But you've got to put your best foot forward the first minute you speak to somebody, because you may never have a second chance. So that's my.
Oh no, that's great, Frank. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both Lucio and Georgina. I think. I think the key though is to stay consistent and persistent, and you don't want to work with everybody. There are some clients that you just don't click with, and you're both better off moving on. But I think the biggest challenge right now is just staying ahead of the curve, because so much changes so quickly and information is so readily available. It's, how do you stay one step ahead of the client? And then just, with all of our markets in major shortage of inventory, just, trying to get your foot in the door, at least get your foot in the door, for a pitch, and I hope it's a good fit and you get the listing.
Yeah, and you make a very good point that sometimes it's seen as a luxury, saying no to certain piece of business. But I think that's really on point, because sometimes we engage ourselves in this piece of business that we know are not good just to get them, and we could be utilizing that time to do something else that is actually going to close and that is actually going to get us paid. And so I think that's as privileged as that might sound, and actually it's a very good piece of advice. And I absolutely kind of like agree with you. Another thing that I want to add to this challenge for me is it's like Georgina's, like everybody said, we're always competing with the same people. Whenever I get called to do a specific price point, I know the same 3 or 4 people are going to show up. All I have to ask is this one, and this one coming, and they're like, it's the same darn. But that's been literally since day one, and it's not only with luxury, it was with new construction as well. It's the same people 17 years ago. And what I found, what made the difference for me, and it has to do with that connection that we have been discussing, is your value proposition. If you know what you're bringing to the table, then you resonate with that client. And so you need to be very clear as to who you are in that market space, in that business, so that they can connect with you. Because it's not always about experience for those people who are new and trying to break into luxury real estate. It's not always about portfolio and the experience. It's about the connection. And so developing those tools and developing that attitude that you have a strong value proposition, I think that makes a difference. And so we're about to run out of time, but I want to ask one last question. And this is, of course, a good way to close it. What do you think is the most valuable tool that a real estate agent can acquire to attract luxury clients? One tool. What do you think? I baffle you with this one. Okay, I'm going to put Lucio. Lucio is never lost for words. So Lucio, what do you think is that?
I was actually holding back, letting the other panelists jump in. Here's what I discovered. The difference between me in 1998 and me now in terms of tools is that I have found that my monthly marketing material that I send every month to my farm, which is 600 homes, has been the best tool. If I would have known in 1998 that if I would have invested in consistent marketing in a specific area, I'd be competing against Georgina, for goodness sakes. But I didn't. And I think that that's one of the most valuable tools that I have at my disposal because it's mine. It's the way it looks because I want it to look that way, but it shows that I'm consistent, I'm professional, and they need to work with me. So that's my valuable tool right now.
What about you, Georgina? And we have literally 3 minutes, 2 actually.
Okay, I think it's to have a system. So just to Lucio's point, so I make X amount of calls a day, send out a newsletter, do all these things, but really follow up is the most important thing. So not to reach out once, you have to reach out 11 times is what I'm told before somebody might actually, respond.
And Frank, what is your one?
Just to kind of echo on that, I think consistency, I've said it a couple times, but I really, really, really think you need to just be consistent with what you're doing. Sending out a mailing once is never going to do anything. Sending it out for 12, 13, 14 years, for sure. So I think, pick something that works for you and just really be consistent with it.
Yeah, and I will add to this that it's about investing in yourself and in your business. And sometimes investing is not money, sometimes it's time. But invest on it, and be ready for the business as it grows. And so with this, Georgina, Lucio, Frank, thank you very much for your time and your expertise and being willing to share your best practices. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you very much. And now for the audience, please remember that our last module is going to be in person at the national conference. The session is going to be on September 29th, 1 p.m. Pacific time. Again, this is in person at the Latitude. So I hope to see you and more of you there. In the meantime, here you have all of these amazing speakers, social handles for Instagram. Please follow them. There is so much to learn from just looking at them doing this incredible business. So again, thank you for your time, and we'll see you in San Diego in a few weeks. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.